Hey guys, so this week I've been playing God of War Ascension, but I'm actually going to be reviewing The Walking Dead Survival Instinct. I'm just kidding. That game is garbage. Anyways, God of War is a prequel to the other ones. It takes place before that. But is it any good? Does it feel like they had all these ideas and they just need to get them out? Or does it feel like, let's just make another God of War game, I guess? Well, here's my opinion of God of War Ascension. Kratos, the Spartan general with a propensity to violence and the angst of a teenager, is back in God of War Ascension. The game actually takes place before the events of the original God of War, where Kratos is like sitting around doing nothing, and then some dude's like, "Hey, yo dog, watch out, God police are gonna throw you in God jail, you better run." Even though the game is a prequel, it feels like an odd choice for placing the prequel because it doesn't involve, like, how did Kratos kill his family, or how did he rise to power, or how did he meet the God of War Ares, or any of that. How did he get the Blades of Chaos? The game takes place after all of that happened and, just before the first one, so it feels like, you're not going to explain? I thought that's the point of prequels, to explain, like, how did this thing happen? Also, the game's story does this weird thing where it actually starts at the end of the game where you already are in prison, and then you go back to like 3 weeks later, and then you go forward again, and then you go back to 2 weeks later, and you bounce around. It's not the easiest to follow or most compelling narrative they've ever told, but God of War is not about narrative. God of War is about violence. And in the violence department, it's pretty standard stuff. You're Kratos, you got your Blades of Chaos, and you swing them around, and you slice people up, and then occasionally there's a quick time event where you, chop some dude up and stab him in the heart or rip his head off and all that kind of stuff. Because it's a prequel, they can't just give you all these new weapons that Kratos doesn't have in the other games, so you're only ever using the Blades of Chaos. But they change it up a little bit by adding, elemental powers, like you can use fire blades of chaos or shadow or lightning. They do a little bit different, but they're not crazy different. And when it comes to the variety of enemies that you get to decimate, there aren't that many. There's a handful of dudes. You keep finding basically the same thing. You fight mostly goat men. Occasionally you fight dudes that are half bug. And every once in a while you fight an elephant man. But there's not that many different enemies. It's kind of weird. And while there's a number of different environments that you pass through, the game feels incredibly linear. That's not to say that God of War isn't a linear game as always, but they usually do a good job of hiding it, making it feel like there's scale, there's a battle going on in the background, or some giant monster. And this, no, it's mostly walking down corridors. You spend a lot of your time going down all these various corridors and open areas and just solving all these puzzles, and you're like, what was I even supposed to be doing? Some guy said find an oracle 7 chapters ago, and they're finally the oracle. And the God of War series has always had these really memorable boss fights and moments, and this game doesn't really have that. You just kind of go from one place to another, and eventually you might fight a boss, but probably not. There are only a handful of actual boss fights in the game, and they're not all that memorable anyways. And while the opening moments of the game start out on this prison that's actually on this giant that's all moving and it's really awesome, the rest of the game doesn't really reflect that. And anytime the game tries to do, look at all this scale, the camera pulls way the hell out, and I'm trying to fight dudes, I can't even see Kratos anymore. I'm like, is that little speck of light me? I guess? The game really feels like it's just kind of painting by numbers. It's like, well, what does God of War need? It has to have these things. Well, we'll check those off, and then that's a God of War game. But the overall game feels like it's missing that, that passion, that drive, that special something that all of the other God of War games have had that have really made me love them. This game doesn't feel like a bunch of people got into a room and said, we've got all these great ideas for a God of War game, we just have to make one. It just kind of feels like people got together and said, you want to make another God of War game? Yeah, I guess. What do you want to do? I don't know. These blades can be fire sometime? Yeah, that's enough. I mean, they did add multiplayer to the game, which maybe is good, but it's hidden behind an online pass, so I couldn't play it. So I have no idea if it's good or not. God of War Ascension is not a terrible game. It's just kind of, it's an alright game. Honestly, if you're a huge God of War fan, then you probably already get this. If you never really liked the series, or you're just kind of about the series, skip this. I mean, get one of the other games that's got a little bit more Devil May Cry. I think these types of games that come out, I think my list goes Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Rising, and then God of War Ascension. I mean, all of them they're all right. They're just varying levels. I think, this one's not that good.